Okay, I'm going to talk about character strings. And basically, what are character strings? They're just a sequence of characters. Okay, so if we wanted to do work with words, essentially, okay, um, two different ways we can handle characters in C++. We can use the so-called the C style character strings. Um, C++ is a language that was built on the C programming language. So the traditional way or the original way of handling strings was through the C style character strings. Okay. And the basic idea is that what is a character string? It's a sequence of characters and it has this special character at the end. Okay. All right. So, like here, uh, one other term that we'll use is this idea of a literal string constant. So this is a string. So if you were to set a string variable or an array, initialize it with this. This is string, or this is a string. Um, this would all be stored. This is string, and then a null character would be stored too. And we'll take a look at an example, or at least a couple of examples through the two different ways. Okay, so here's the basic way we can get a string in, read a string in. Okay, um, we could use it this way. The input operator skips white spaces, so this may represent a problem for us when we're reading a entire line in. So we do have another way of doing that, and we can do it through this thing the dot get line, cn dot get line. Okay, that's one way we can actually go in and read a character string in. Okay, into an array. All right. But here's the basic functions that are part of when you're working with C-style strings. And I'm going to limit kind of whatever we cover to just these few. Okay. String length, string copy, string cat, and string compare. Okay. So basic idea here is that string length, this will return the length of a string. So however many characters are in that string. String copy. This is one way to copy like a string from one variable to another, or an array. In our case, it's going to be one array to another. String concatenate. This one is adding one string to the end of another. And this is string compare. Okay, so we'll use these in a simple example to kind of show you how this works. Okay, so here's an example of using C-style strings. Okay. And so first thing is you're going to include this C string, right? And this has some functions that we need to use for this program, okay? And this particular example, basic idea is that we have a couple of character arrays. We put some strings in those arrays. And what we do is we do a comparison between the two strings, string 1 and string 2. And we do that right here. And depending upon the result of that, this comparison, we're either going to do a string copy here, which basically just is a copies one string into another. And we also have, or we do this other string copy, depending upon the comparison, right? And then after that, we concatenate it. So we either take Bob or John and put it at the front of this phrase, okay? Then this one just gives you the length of that phrase. And then this displays what the sentence is. And that's it. So this one shows you these four functions, a basic example of those four functions. Okay. So to look at these and to figure out like which, how do these functions work? If you go to the, let me see, this is not it. If you go to the textbook on page 387, at the bottom here, it has the string functions, and these are the four. These would be the only four that, we'll use in this course. But basic idea, string length will return the length of the string. String copy just copies one string into another, so it takes T and puts it into S, or copies it into S. String concatenate just takes put string T to the end of S, okay? And string compare, depending upon the result, one of three things can happen. Either that S is less than T, then it returns a negative value. If they're the same, it's going to return to 0. If there's a match, so if you have like a, let's say you're looking up names in a phone book or something, you could have a match. And this one here, it returns positive if S is greater than T, okay? And what you'll find is this could be pretty useful for like a binary search, right? That, depending upon, this tells you kind of it's in the S shows up in the lower part of the list or before T. This one you can use to determine whether or not S is in the upper half of the list, right? And then this is an exact match. So you could apply these functions with the binary search. You could modify the binary search function that we had previously covered to use these, to do string comparisons instead of with string style or C style functions, okay? These are the C style string functions. And we're also going to look at C++ way of handling strings. So that's the second way to look at it, okay? But that's all this program does. So it does the string compare. So in this case, string 1 is greater than string 2, right? Shows up alphabetically later. So then this will be positive. This evaluates out the positive, okay? True, sorry. This evaluates out the true. Because if you look at it, you say, so it's less than 0, so it's actually going to be I may have misspoke. String 1 actually shows up after string 2. So in this case, what's going to happen is that it would put John into the sentence if this came out to be true, but it's not going to be true. So what I'm going to do is cut this out, put it over here. Puts Bob into the sentence, right? Because the way this is written, right? So because this thing evaluates out to a positive number, if we just take a quick look at that again, one more time. So what are we finding? We're going to find that S, which is the first one, is greater than this one. So this thing evaluates out to positive. Okay, so because it evaluates out to positive, it's not less than 0, and then this would actually execute. Okay, so it actually is going to put Bob into the sentence. So the next one is it puts Bob, it takes the sentence, which was Bob, and takes and concatenates the phrase to it. And phrase was defined as, single quote S, shirt was green. Okay, what's green is green. Okay. Okay. So just continuing on, then the next one, it just does a string length. Okay. So that's pretty much it. It's a good little example. I just got it from the lecture slides, so you can use this and try it out. This is C style strings. We'll also look at C++ style strings. Okay, so the next thing we'll look at is the string class. And string class is we'll also need the string include. So we got to put the string include instead in this one. And what this one is that this is using C++ style strings, okay? And just a few things about it, it's going to implement, it's so-called implementation of this concept of a character string. So what you really need to get out of this is just you can see how in C++ it's a little bit different how strings are handled, okay, than how they were with in C, okay? But what you'll recognize is C++ can support both C style and C++ style strings, okay? They both ways work. All right. But what you'll find, I think, is this is easier, okay? So there's a lot of things that happen automatically behind the scenes for you, but you'll see that really the way we're going to start working with this is essentially we got a new, if you want to think about it, it's kind of like a new data type called string. It's really a little bit different because it actually is a what's called an object, but how you use it is just as if you would if it was a new data type, okay? And it's based on this thing called a string class, all right? So it's a class or a template used to build these things called string, okay? Uh, as long as you got the general idea kind of here, it's really more of like implementation, how that works, okay? Okay. So here's some of they call these methods with string, okay? C string is one of them. This is actually one we took a look at a little bit earlier. It actually, this is how you can return or get the actual sequence of characters that's being stored in that, okay? What these are, this tells you the size. This one is just for if it's empty. This one is if you wanted to break it apart, okay? You want to pull something out of it. It's called substring, okay? And it tells you like its start location and its length. And you can actually return just part of the string, okay? All right. Now, what you're going to find with when you're using the string class is that it's much easier. It's kind of like it's when we were using just our standard data types, you know, float, double, character, boolean, that you can use these relational operators. You don't have to go like we did with the C style string. We had to use a string compare. Okay. In this case, you just use the relational operators to do that. Okay. To concatenate, well, you just use a addition, and it will take one string and put it on the end of another. And copy, well, we can just use the assignment operator. All right, so it's much easier to work with C++ style strings. And string class. So we have IOStream string. So string is the new one we put in our include for using the string class. And then here's our strings. So you just define them, you declare them as string type, data type. It's not really data type, it's a class, and it creates an object, but it works just like a data type. So I have the same ones, John, and then Bob, and then shirt is green, and then sentence, and you don't have to define the lengths here, which is kind of nice. And then the comparison. The comparison between the two is just done through the relational operator, the arrow relational operator, or the less than relational operator. And all you do is use the assignment operator. So you have to use a string copy. You just say, okay, sentence is equal to str1. And here, sentence is equal to str2. So in this case, you see this also is false, and then Bob is assigned to the sentence, okay, to sentence. Now what you see here is that you're using the string concatenation operator. It just says whatever sentence is, add phrase to the end of it, okay, or append it to the end of it. The next one is it uses the dot size, or uses this, not dot size, but this is the access operator, uses this dot size function to return the length of the sentence, okay. Last one, it just says cout is sentence, and it displays the string sentence. So this is easier to work with than using the functions. You don't have to remember the functions. You just use it the same way as you use, you know, your operators. Use the same operators. They work a little bit differently, of course, than they do when you're using just like our standard data types that are defined like integer and double. But behind the scenes, it actually performs the operations for you, okay? And one of the things to pay attention to when it does a comparison, remember that uppercase letters are different than lowercase, right? We have uppercase actually shows up in the ASCII table before lowercase. So there's a difference between the two when it does the comparison. It would do comparison based on, so it has to be the same case, right? Because all the J's would show up before all the lowercase letters, okay? All the uppercase letters show up before any of the lowercase letters, okay? So you have to pay attention to that. Okay, so this works the same way, and I'll go and, I coded this thing up just to show you, and I'm going to run it. So here it is with C++ strings, and you run it, and there it is, length of 20, and Bob's shirt is green. Let me just make this a little larger. So as expected. So it works the same way. All right, it works the same way as the previous one. It's just simpler. So it's a good thing to look at and see those differences. These are described, the string classes in section 7.8. Okay, so you'll see that. All right, just going back to the slides real briefly here. Okay, so just in the end here, just for at least for the summary here. So what do we have? Array is a contiguous block of data. Array is useful for storing data temporarily, and a few other things, right? We looked at strings also. I didn't write anything about strings here, but we looked at strings. Binary search algorithms. To use that, of course, you use this binary search. You have to have the items being sorted. Selection sort is a way to sort items. Okay, so those are kind of like some of the main points here in this chapter. And that's really the end of this chapter, at least the lecture portion of this chapter.